to talk about what it was like developing a collection during a pandemic and doing your graduate showcase during this past year, which must have been wild. How did you approach your work and how you were going to present, knowing that you wouldn't have as much of a physical presence to show your work?
Gosh, I mean, wild, I'm not sure. God, I don't know if sitting at home in my little cave, as I would probably call it, but it was I mean, the way I approached it.
Do you feel that you needed to digitally document the process more so you could show that on a computer or a Zoom or whatever, versus just having the actual garments and maybe your sketchbooks or whatever so someone can flick through it? Did you feel it had to be more translatable to digital?
For sure, yeah. It was always, sharing with the teachers, it was always digital.
Yeah.
It was always on Teams, Zoom,
Yeah.
whatever it needed to be. But that was a good preparation for, in general, portfolio, and the fact that you get jobs online through that portfolio. You show that work on Instagram or on a website. It's a good preparation for that. And it was a good way to make sure all of that body of work was all in one place.
Right.
That was really important. But I mean, kind of starting it, approaching it, it definitely had to be really considered, knowing that we were not going to have the access to the materials we wanted, to the equipment we wanted, to the mannequins, the big tables, the big spaces. I think first it was important to kind of create a space for yourself as well for working. Set up your own little studio or get a load of trestles from here, there and everywhere because IKEA was not open. So it was a whirlwind and all sorts. But
also when you're applying for a job, or I know when we get applications for things, you don't want to look through 60, 100 pages of development. You don't have the time to do that. So being able to develop kind of what you want to say for a collection or a project in a shorter amount of pages and not going through the computer for an hour must have been really difficult, because usually you could have whatever you wanted shown, whatever you wanted on a stand, laying out on a table. It must have been a really different way to think about getting your point across without having the access to someone seeing you physically.
Yeah, for sure. Trying to get the essence of the work across also digitally, thinking about that.
And did you use more than just still image? Did you use moving image? Did you incorporate anything else besides pictures?
I experimented quite a lot with sculpture as well.
Amazing.
Obviously, because my work started, I'd had the concept and what I wanted to kind of explore this year since 2019, because it's when I started to do weightlifting.
Amazing.
Yeah, and I'd never I always went to the gym. It was cardio. It was okay. It was always kind of a thought of being active, being healthy, or to do with the weight and such. But then one day I had someone how do you do a deadlift? What is it that person is doing right now? Deadlift is it will work the whole body, all the muscles in the body. Right. It's a really complete movement. But it's just a barbell, some plates on the floor, and you pick it up like that. But it's hard to kind of.
Amazing.
But I found that so interesting because it was so entire. But looking at the disciplines and the growth, the movement of weightlifting and muscle, it was such a new thing for me.
Yeah.
A new connection I'd never felt ever with my body.
Yep.
And I wanted to just explore that as a whole. So I did, like, at first it was kind of around the time we were somewhat allowed in gyms, I think. So I just contacted someone like with some good muscle that I could kind of document.
Amazing.
And just had them go through these movements with all the disciplines, and I just wanted to see what was going on there. I wanted to see like what would happen to the back muscles if they did one certain thing.
Right.
What would like the stomach do in like a Russian twist, like how can I create that starting point?
Yeah.
So I documented all of this, and was really drawn to kind of abdominal, to the back, to the shoulders, and to like the quads. So, and then from that I started to kind of think about sculpture and silhouette, thinking that I can't go and get a load of fabric now, and I can't do this on a mannequin.
Yeah.
How am I gonna create a new silhouette? How am I gonna explore that? So I started using sculpture. I just created my own kind of like interpretation of that body in my own style, and then just perform the movements on the sculpture.
Wow.
And from that, it was a new silhouette. It would show also the tear, the wear, and kind of what was going on there, so that I had a good path to kind of go down.
Yeah.
But like another way, kind of coping with a lack of access to material, like using stuff from hardware stores, like thinking about the shops that were open during the time. It was the hardware shops and supermarkets. Just some kind of Play-Doh, hardware rope and sponge, like car sponges and stuff like this.
Amazing.
So you really had to be a bit crafty.
Yeah.
That's how I would probably describe it.
Yeah.
Crafty.
Yeah.
Like the starting point. And I know for sure if like this hadn't have kind of happened, pandemic, etc., then my collection would be so different.
Right.
My body of work would be so different.
And do you feel, I mean, of course, aside from the fact that this has savaged the world in really horrific ways, do you think there were any sort of positives or silver linings from having to work in such an innovative and crafty way that maybe pushed you to think about things differently, or you know, had you approach your work differently that was good?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it kind of made you something really important anyway. I think we need to be a bit slower with what we create, and like thinking about the value of our work, being very at one with it. That was really special. And I think, you know, if I was and we were around the studio or in our workspaces, it may have been a bit faster. It may have been a bit like you would just had the opportunity to be really personal with it. My room, for me, it was like, I would call it like a cave because, you know, pictures on the wall, it was like, although it was so personal and like kind of hard to escape almost, because you're just like living with it all. It was very special because you really got the chance to kind of overcome different problems that were otherwise so accessible, like equipment and facilities, aspects that were so accessible here. You kind of had to struggle through that.
And how do you feel that, I mean, you got a grant and funding from UAL to finish your BA project, is that right? How do you feel that, you know, having that funding from UAL helped you to be able to work towards producing a collection and documenting and showing a collection that maybe you wouldn't have been able to do in the same way should you not have that funding?
Yeah, it was so important. Like, I cannot think kind of how I would be at this stage now without that funding. Like, not only like the access to material, equipment, it was so important, but it was also just a peace of mind. Like, it was being able to go home, knowing that your gas was on and it was staying on, knowing that, you know, you had enough food, etc., knowing that everything was fine and you could go home and be in that stress-free environment without those financial stresses to kind of, you were free to create.
And I think a lot of
without
people,
that weight.
I think a lot of people throughout the pandemic have felt that way, you know, single, you know, families, to companies, to students, to people working abroad. I think everyone has faced that in a really similar way. And it's something that everyone can relate to, because you still need to be able to produce and live your life and work on top of something that was ravaging the world. So I can imagine having the peace of mind to be able to create your work and to document your work without having the added stress of financial stressors is amazing.
No, for sure. I think that's, for me, that's what really kind of made that for me. It was, that stress was taken off. It was so, you when you're a creative, you need a clear head, you need a clear space, you need like kind of a stress-free environment. And I think that's something people have really realized during this. Like, we don't want to stress anymore. We don't want to lose sleep. We don't want to, we just want to be happy, healthy. We want to kind of create in a healthy environment. And like, it was funny, actually the other day, my classmate, she posted like a poll on Instagram saying, how many all-nighters have you done this year? And she posted all the replies, and everyone was like, no, none. Like, we are not, like, it's not happening. Like, and just that kind of the importance of taking care of yourself and being in that stress-free environment and being slow, and the knowledge that you cannot create if you have that whatever stress, whether it's financial or you really need to look after yourself. Like, I always think, you know, you really can't serve anyone else unless you serve yourself first. And that's what the funding was able to give, like myself and like so many other students that I know, that relief.
Yeah, for sure.
Not just equipment, not just material, and just a sense of safety in that is really important. Yeah, definitely. And yourself, what kind of support did you have, like after your MA or during?
Well, when I was here doing the MA, of course, we didn't have to face something like COVID or shutdowns or anything like that. And it was a really different experience for me, because coming from being educated in the US, doing my BA at Parsons, to then doing the master's here, it was a really different way of working. It was much more self-led. It was about your peers and feeding off your peers and working together for sort of an extended, long period of time. I think it's like 18 months or almost 2 years for the MA. So I had a very different experience from you for the last year and a half, because coming here, it was working with the tutors all the time and Fabio, and it was an incredible kind of super physically immersive experience where you were in the studio every day, all day. You were working with your peers, seeing how other people do things, having conversations in person, in groups. So it was amazing in that respect, because I had never worked like that before. Of course, I had worked as a designer before coming to the MA. But having that kind of education experience, that fashion education experience in the UK was incredible, and it's something that I so cherish. Even working as a designer today with my own brand, it's that way of collaboratively working and dialogue and being pushed is so important. And I'm happy you were able to at least have that before the pandemic at St. Martin's, because I think that's one of the most important things to fashion education, is being in a group with people and having those creative dialogues constantly. How was that different for you? Because I had it for the whole time I was on the program, but you only had it for your first year? Or first and second
first
year?
and second, and then kind of halfway through the internship year,
Yeah.
it was pandemic.
Yeah.
But yeah, completely agree. I
Yeah.
think that's something that really makes like St. Martin's and these creative schools is, you know, while the teaching is amazing and the skills you learn, it's the people you meet,
Of course.
and kind of being able to get feedback from your classmates and giving them feedback, and just looking around, just seeing what's going on. You kind of think of things you never would have previously. You know, we're all, everyone has such a different background, such a different approach to working.
Yeah.
That's where you learn. That's where you grow. That's where you become independent, and like there's nothing like it. I think in first and second year, I think we were all just trying to find our feet first. Like
for sure.
it was quite terrifying and scary, but again, like and you know, not knowing like what's going on, what's gonna happen, what you need to be doing, but you had those people around you to kind of, we were guiding each other. Like it was really nice and really important.
Yeah.
And but then kind of after COVID, you know, COVID term, after coming back and coming into the final year, I definitely felt there was a more sense of like community with us, even though we weren't kind of together working. I think we all had a really big appreciation for each other, like that definite sense of that kind of love for each other and respect for each other's work. And I don't think we would have had that as much as if we didn't we weren't kind of pulled apart in that certain way. We would have all probably quite comfortably came back and just did our own thing.
Carried on,
But yeah, it was a great environment. Like,
it's something I noticed as well doing my studies here, is that I think because the MA program is maybe a bit smaller than the BA, everyone had a really specific and individual point of view. So no matter what you were into, you just had to be obsessed with that, right? And there weren't really two people the same, kind of doing the same thing, working the same way. So being exposed to all different ways of working and different ways of researching and developing from so many different points of view was one of the things that was really important for me as a student here. And you sort of pick things up and you learn from your peers and you grow from your peers, and you're able to see things from a different point of view. And I think that's something I've carried with me throughout the past few years of me having my own brand, of being able to look at things from a different point of view. And I think that's one of the really special things about Central St. Martin's. And I'm so happy you were able to have that before kind of COVID happened, and that you were able to also experience it in a slightly different way once you came back after COVID term or however long you were out. Having those different perspectives constantly is something that I think would make you a great designer and an empathetic designer, and someone who can work in so many different ways, and you can create in a pressure situation. It's something that can also teach you for real life, because when you leave university and you have a job or you start a company, their deadlines are real, and the way you need to be prolific in your work is real, and it's not a slap on the wrist if you don't do it well. It's you can get fired, or you won't progress, or your company won't grow, or whatever. So I think you having those experiences here as a student is super important, and gets you ready for a life of being a working designer, if that's what you choose to do. Because it's real world teaching, and that's super important. There's no sugarcoating. There's no COVID happened in the real world just as well as in There are no COVID happened to businesses as much as it happened to students, as much as it happened to stylists or whoever, photographers. Everyone had to completely changed the way they were working. Even for us, when we were doing shows, pre-COVID, we were doing shows with 500 to 1,000 people a season. Obviously, that's not happening over COVID. So as a company, we had to rethink the way we were going to document and sell the collections and present the collections to press and everything. It's a very different way of working, but out of that came really beautiful ways of expressing what you want to say from a collection point of view through video, through imagery that could be sent kind of easily to press, to buyers. You could have conversations in ways that you didn't before, and they were all slightly in a different context than you would if you were just having a runway show or a presentation, or kind of when we're in Paris doing the press appointments and the market week appointments. It was a very different conversation because there was a different context around it, and I think that's really important. And I'm sure you had the same experience being a student. It was producing work while you're in a studio with your peers, and then producing work when you're alone. And I can imagine it was super stressful and super hard, but it was another thing that will prepare you for how to deal with things when things inevitably go crazy, which is the reality.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I think we needed that. We really needed that, to kind of be slow, to kind of take that time and reevaluate the way we work and the kind of world we're going into.
What's the purpose?
Yeah, do you feel like you were taught very well? Obviously you did Parsons, you have worked, especially in New York, America, where they are, as you say, very business kind of based. Here, do you feel like you would have been prepared to financially start a brand, or would you have had the knowledge? How did you start that?
No, I don't think, just having my education be only from the US and working at the companies I did for a couple of years before coming to London, I don't think, for a few reasons, I don't think I would have the same type of company or experience. Doing the MA really allowed me to be really self-indulgent. It's a really luxurious thing to go back to school after you're working. It's expensive. It takes a lot of time. You have to move to a new country. It was a big kind of undertaking to do that. And because you had that opportunity to develop and kind of refine your point of view in such a specific way, that's sort of what gave me confidence to be like, you know what, maybe I could have my own company. I always wanted to do it, but I didn't want to do it so quickly after I graduated. I wanted to work somewhere for a while. I wanted to gain more industry experience in Europe, not the US. So an opportunity came right after the MA show, where I was offered to work at Versace on the couture collections, kind of right after the show. So I moved very quickly from London to Italy. And I saw the way an atelier like that worked, and the incredible craftsmanship and the teamwork and the same sort of balancing of ideas and pushing each other in a way that felt really exciting and something I'd never experienced working before. But then I sort of started Halpern by accident. I again wasn't planning on having a company, but we kept, after the MA show, we kept getting requests to sell the collection and from buyers, and I was just like, I can't produce it. I don't know how to do that. I have no experience in that. I am also living in Italy. So it just, after a few months of it happening and saying, we would like to sell this, how can we do this? I started to rethink my plan. And then I ended up starting Halpern in London and commuting back and forth from Milan every week.
How was that?
Yeah, it was amazing. It was fabulous. Nice. It was so nice. Half the week in Milan, half the week in London. It was amazing. But I had no experience in production. I had worked a little bit in New York, so I had understood a little bit about changing from kind of runway to production and how you produce a collection and getting in touch with factories and mills. And one thing I started really small, and every season it has grown, which I'm very, very grateful for. But one of the important things that still is true for me today is that we produce everything in and around London. So nothing is produced in the Far East or in other parts of Europe. The collections are always made here in the UK, and that's something that is important to me. Of course, embroidery is done in other countries and things like that. You go where the best work is done, but it's this country has given me so much, and I'm so grateful to the UK that it is so natural for us to want to produce everything here, to give back to an economy that has been so gracious to me and my education. And also it's a huge difference when you're shipping samples back and forth from God knows where in the world, when you can really just get on a train and go somewhere. So it's from a sustainability point of view, producing locally, the collections locally, is very similar to like eating locally from locally grown farms. It's the same concept, just on a very different scale. So it's something that was really important to me. And you just learn on the job when you have your own company. For the past year, it was crazy with the way we had to deal with finances and cash flow. Fashion already has a crazy cash flow kind of system to begin with, and then you add COVID into it, and it just blows everything up.
Okay. But did you learn like a lot about that in New York? Because I think
in New York, really no, you don't learn any of that in any school. That is just working.
Just self-taught, really.
Yeah, you have to. You need to have the right people around you to explain things to you. You need to have a gut instinct of what feels right. Running a business is a lot on intuition. The same way you would work or develop or do a collection or a presentation, it really has to come from you with trusted people kind of guiding the way. But a business, when you run a business, it is you, and you have to have the right team around you. But at the end of the day, when your name is on the door, all the responsibility falls with you, and you have to be willing to make decisions and sacrifices and risks to get what you want to do. Same way you would work in developing your work, it's the buck stops with you, and that's the same when you have a company. But we had to decide what was the right way for us to showcase our collections over this past year and a half, when things are not anywhere close to normal. So I think one really good thing to come out of the pandemic is people are a bit slower. You can take your time a bit more. There's more intention with your work. What do we need all of these clothes? What is the purpose of all of these clothes? Can you make a smaller, more edited body of work that is more impactful and more meaningful to people? I make quite expensive clothing, so it's not a seasonal type of clothing. It's not a cheap price point. It's a luxury price point. You're making things for people to have, and people aren't going to be going to as many things and dressing up as much. So what they do spend money on needs to be important. And when it comes to showcasing, I think from a global industry point of view, it showed us that a classical runway format is not the only way you can show. We were able to make films and have conversations and do interviews and work with people we never would have before. And it shows that there are so many ways to get your point across with whatever collection you're making, whether it be digitally or small salon-style presentations. Making films were hugely successful this past year, and you were able to storytell in a way that a runway doesn't. So I guess after kind of doing your project and your final collection throughout this period, how did you decide what was appropriate for you to document your work, or how you wanted to show your work? And then with the show, how was that working during a time like this?
Definitely had to have a body of work that was translatable for a digital kind of platform. So we had to think about that, because always also tutorials and lessons, there'd always be Zoom, of course. So you had to have that kind of readily available for sharing digitally. But that was good, it really prepares you for, now anyway, we view everything on Instagram, on Vogue Runway. It's all digital. And it's really important to kind of get to grips with that.
Yeah.
But I mean, for me anyway, I always throughout the process keep it on very loose sheets so that I can like put it all over my wall, put it where it needs, edit it, put it together, take bits out, put things in where I feel they should be. So that's always how I'll approach the work. And for me also, I think like development is my favorite thing ever. It's so exciting. The process, like the things that did happen, that could have happened, that like went so well, but just couldn't be in the end. Like this is what I find very exciting. And there was so much of that. And because we were kind of so isolated also, we really got to delve into that. Definitely not in the same way we would have here. So I was really able to just be very at one with myself and the process, thinking about like textile development, but then sort of in a more crafty way. Like there was a lot of spray paint, like a bit too much. I think I definitely like
open a window.
Yeah, like the windows were constantly open. But so for me, I think I definitely took more of a crafty kind of approach than I would have if I was here. But I'm really happy I did that, because actually, funny thing, like I was obsessed with DIY, like interior DIY, like American girls. And there's this one I was really obsessed with, but she always did DIY on like vases and stuff. For some reason, in a pandemic, that's and we were all obsessed with our homes, and you know, we also. But I feel like I took a lot out of that as well. The spray paint and like making things look old and using rope and all that. Actually, like I don't think I've kind of accepted that probably is like one of the main starting points of like the work.
I mean, I guess you always react to what's around you, right?
Yeah.
And if that's what you were looking at and that's what you were taking in, DIY vases is the collection.
Yeah, not exactly how I thought this year would go, but I was just obsessed. So it was definitely very crafty, very thinking of new ways to, okay, I have this idea for a textile or this idea for a knit. How can I, like, so I want it to do this in a certain way. I want it to look and feel like that without going to a factory or going to someone who would do that professionally. How can I do this for both cheaper and in a way that I feel think be very like it's very very hand touched. That's the approach I kind of wanted, hand touched, raw. And I was okay that it didn't look 100% incredibly perfect, refined, because I knew that I was there. When I look at it in final and I look at that process, I know that it was rough, but I'd learned so much. Like for me also this year, I see it so much as not a final year. I like this project I could just carry on with and continue with forgotten designs and forgotten textiles, but at some point you kind of have to stop and say that's enough, which was maybe sometimes a bit of a problem. Like other people were doing their final stuff and I was like, okay, but what if it was this and this and this? Like tutors like, you need to stop now, stop developing.
And
but I loved
when
it.
it came to that, how did you decide, and then how did you actually present your work if you had to digitally? If you said things were more unfinished or kind of roughs, how did you come to the conclusion of how you were going to present that if you had to digitally?
I think I wanted just the matter of kind of not editing too much. Like, although you want your best work in your portfolio, for me personally, I want to kind of go down a more development process route with my employment. So I definitely thought about that. I wanted to show the roughness of it. Everything was scanned as it is. It was, the pictures were as they are, the ugly and then the refined and then the developed textile and so on. Like, it was just very much, I think, the rawness of it. I let that be, and knowing that it was authentic to me. Whether or not, you know, some companies may want something more clean and polished, and I knew that the kind of pathway I wanted to go down when I left St. Martin's, that's what I wanted. So that's what I wanted to get out there. But a lot of the stuff, it's just kind of drawings as is, all in one big bundle of page, like textile as it is. But I think you can definitely see a clear development there. Yeah. You can see how that happened and why it happened. I think, as I said before, my project was very much about like physicality, body, muscle. But it might not be so recognizable in the final product, or even throughout the process, because I just let it lead me where I wanted it to go. Like, I took references kind of from my year out, from you know, mid-century art and sculpture and Italian, this colour of the Italian streets and walls and everything, and I just let that take me, really. So it was so personal, and then to maintain that rawness and my kind of approach to the authenticity of it. Like I wanted that to stay there. So like digitally, I wanted it to be so processed, so development, and to really feel kind of the roots that were taken there. But as I say, I could carry on for forever. But I think it's time I kind of try and close up, move on, and
good.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you have any thoughts about what you want to do after St. Martin's now?
I mean,
take some time off, maybe.
Definitely, like, take a breather. Yeah. I'm still kind of coming down from that. I want to take a little while, but I think I definitely want to kind of build up my skills during this time, even just reading a bit more, learning more about, you know, finance or business. Yeah. So that's kind of what I want to think about now. And then we'll see. We'll see.
Take it. You know, I don't think you need to make any major decisions right now. If doing some more courses and thinking about how to develop a bit more, if that's the goal right now, then take it slowly. You know, there's no reason to jump into anything. I think if there's anything we've learned, is that things can be a bit more slow, a bit more, you know, self-led. You don't have to be formulaic in any way anymore. I think that's this past year and a half has really blown that notion up that you have to do everything very fast and very quick. Take your time and do what's right. I know that's what we're doing and how we're handling it at Halpern, and it has to be personal. So I think if there's anything in your work and your career, it has to be personal, and that's what you should do.
It's the most sustainable way, I think, to work, with value and authenticity and slowness. Make real important decisions, and for sure. Cool. That's really important.
Good luck.
Yes, thank you so much. You too. It was lovely to meet you anyway.
You as well.
Thank you so much.
Of course, thank you.